All right, my plan is to take the videos that video clips I would have been showing you in between some of these slides, just to kind of keep things jumping around a little bit. I'm going to take those and put them right after the notes onto a modern civil rights playlist. So I've got a couple of videos here I want to encourage you to take a look at dealing with the Montgomery bus boycott. And I'll have those right after these notes on our playlist. The Montgomery Bus Boycott is kind of the first big event of the modern civil rights movement, and some of you are going to be familiar with kind of the background, but want to take a look at this one and highlight particularly what's going to go on in Montgomery, Alabama. This is, like we saw in the notes on the Jim Crow laws, the Jim Crow South. There's a big difference between what's on the law books and what's actually happening in reality. Right? The 14th Amendment says everybody needs to be treated equally under the law. Plessy versus Ferguson is saying you can keep things separated as long as they're equal. This was very much the condition, really, from the 1870s up until the 1950s and 60s. You'll see a segregated society in the South. There's an event that is going to kind of catapult this issue into the minds of people. One of the things that's going to greatly help is television. And we took a look in the post-war unit at television and the power of people in the North being able to see these images of things that are going on in the South is going to be a powerful tool for people who wanted to see segregation end to latch onto. Now, in the early part of the 1900s, there's a famous African-American leader named W.E.B. Du Bois, and he's going to found an organization called the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored Peoples. And they are going to be established to fight for the constitutional rights of African Americans, usually in the court system. The place where we're going to see them the most in the history we're going to study is in the legal system. In 1954, there are a couple of big events that are going to happen. One is the Brown versus Board of Education decision. And a guy named Thurgood Marshall, who will go on to be a Supreme Court justice, is going to bring a court case against segregated schools. It goes all the way to the Supreme Court, and in a unanimous decision in 1954, the Supreme Court says you can't have separate schools. What they're going to say is that you, just by having separate schools, you are psychologically tearing down the African American race and superficially inflating the opinion of people going to the white schools. And so they're going to say you've got to desegregate, and we're going to look at a couple of instances of desegregation in our next section that we're going to look at. The other thing is the murder of the young man who you see pictured here. This is Emmett Till. I'm going to link a documentary dealing with Emmett Till there on our playlist. The story of this young man, he's 13, 14 years old, about the age my son Noah is now as I'm recording this. And he's from Chicago. He's a child of a single mother. She sends him down to Money, Mississippi to spend the summer with an uncle and some cousins. And he is, while he's down there, accused of whistling at a white woman. Now, you might not think that sounds like anything too serious, but again, you've got a young black man and a white woman in the South. We've talked about the issues with that. Well, he's accused of whistling at this white woman, and a day or two later, there are a couple of guys that basically come in the middle of the night and take him from his uncle's home. He is found a couple of days later murdered. He's been tied with barbed wire to the fan of a cotton gin and thrown in the river. He's been shot. Uh, his body is mutilated. And the story is uh, perpetuated all through the South. Basically, they know who did it. These two guys that are accused of murdering Emmett Till, but they're put on trial. And the all-white jury finds them innocent. Emmett Till's mom will bring the body back up to Chicago, where she has an open casket funeral. She says she wants everyone to see what they did to her boy, and the outcry that comes from not only the brutality of his murder and what happened to them, but also what happened to the guys who were accused of killing him, is enough to convince people in the South that they really need to start taking steps to end the situations that are down there. The lady that's going to be at the forefront of this is Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks, in history, she was the secretary for the NAACP. She's in Montgomery, Alabama, and she gets on the bus to ride the bus home. In the buses in Montgomery, the front part of the bus was reserved for white passengers. There was a section for black passengers near the back, but if the bus filled up, if you were an African American, you had to give up your seat to anybody who was white that wanted it. Well, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat. I had a cool experience. Traveled to Detroit, Michigan, and in the Henry Ford Museum up there in Detroit. If you ever get a chance to go, they actually have the bus that Rosa Parks sat on. It was a really cool story. It was actually bought by kind of a guy that didn't agree with the end of segregation, and he bought it and took it to his farm and used it for target practice. Basically, sat it up and shot it. But because he did that, the bus was never decommissioned, taken apart for parts, things like that. They were able to track it down and restore it, and so it's actually there in a restored fashion there in Detroit, Michigan. But Rosa Parks is going to sit down. She's going to refuse to give up her seat, and she's going to be arrested. When she's arrested, this sets off around a protest. The young man that's going to come lead these protests is a young Baptist minister by the name of Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. is a student of the ideas of this man. His name is Mahatma Gandhi. He took inspiration from Gandhi's efforts to win independence for the country of India and his forms of nonviolent protest. Now, we know Gandhi did hunger strikes, things like that. What King is going to advocate are social movements that are going to come through. We're going to have you read two works when it comes to these ideas. So you're going to get kind of familiar with these ideas. But what King would do, he'd have people marching. You can see a couple of instances there. Sit-ins were another big one. But in Montgomery, what they wanted to do was to boycott the bus system. Most of the people riding the buses were black. And so King and his supporters organized an effort and says, hey, we're just not going to ride the bus. They have a day where they do it. It works pretty well, and they decide they're not going to ride the bus until everybody is able to sit wherever they want. The Montgomery Bus Boycott goes on, I think, almost a year. But finally, the bus company says, okay, got hit in the pocketbook enough that they said, we'll let you sit where we want. And so it's kind of the first victory of the modern civil rights movement. It shows that these nonviolent tactics can work. Got a great movie in the film library. I know you've been missing that. Called The Long Walk Home. It's got Whoopi Goldberg and Sissy Spacek in it that deals with the Montgomery Bus Boycott. Maybe want to see if you can find for on a streaming service. But the Long Walk Home is the name of that one.